Today, we're diving into a pretty dramatic hypothetical scenario that's been making the rounds online. We're talking about a clandestine military op to kidnap a foreign president. Yeah, it's a story that raises some huge questions about power, about resources, and really about the rules of our modern world. So let's just get right to it. Could something like this actually happen? Well, the source we're looking at today doesn't just debate the idea, it actually walks us through a fictional, high-stakes military operation minute by minute. The story kicks off in the very near future, January 3rd, 2026. The time is just a little after 2 in the morning. And here's the first move, according to this account. A massive cyber attack hits. The power grid in Venezuela's capital, Caracas, just goes down. The entire city is plunged into total darkness. The stage is officially set. And of course, a mission this big needs a codename, right? This one is called Operation Absolute Resolve, a name that definitely implies there is no turning back. So how exactly would a raid like this go down? Well, the source video paints a very detailed and honestly pretty dramatic picture of the assault. The operation is laid out as this multi-stage, lightning-fast attack. First up, you've got the cyber attack we just talked about. Then, airstrikes come in and just wipe out the radar and air defenses. And finally, Delta Force commandos infiltrate the president's residence. The source claims that within just 5 minutes of going in, the president is captured. And get this. This account alleges the operation wasn't just monitored from afar. It claims it was watched live by the U.S. president from Florida, who was quoted as leader describing the whole thing like he was watching a TV show. You can imagine an act like this would send absolute shockwaves across the globe. So the narrative suggests it raises two really critical questions. Why was this done? And what on earth does it mean for the world order? Every major international action needs an official story. So let's take a look at the public justification for this hypothetical raid, just as it's presented in the source video. According to the story, the primary reason given all comes down to some really severe charges filed in a New York court. President Maduro is framed not just as a corrupt leader, but as a full-blown narco-terrorist directly involved in cocaine importation and weapons trafficking. And this slide right here perfectly illustrates the two competing stories. On one hand, the official reason given is the need to stop this narco-terrorist and restore democracy. But on the other hand, the source video makes a really powerful counterargument that the real motivation wasn't drugs at all. It was oil. So let's dig into that argument. According to the source, this entire massive operation really just comes down to a single globally significant resource. The number here is, well, it's staggering. 303 billion barrels. And the source really emphasizes that this isn't just a lot of oil. It's the largest proven crude oil reserve on the entire planet. And just to put that into perspective, this chart shows you how massive that number really is. According to this data, Venezuela's reserves are even larger than Saudi Arabia's, and they dwarf what's in the United States. That's a mind-boggling amount of potential wealth and power. Now, the source argues this conflict didn't just appear out of nowhere. This timeline details decades of escalating tension, starting with the nationalization of the oil industry under Hugo Chavez, which kicked out American companies, and moving through years and years of sanctions and export blocks. So to build its case for oil being the real motive, the source then tries to systematically dismantle that official drug trafficking story. It argues that Venezuela is actually a minor player in the cocaine trade to the U.S., that America's deadliest drug, fentanyl, comes from other countries, and that other nations that traffic way more drugs weren't targeted. Okay, so this brings us to the really crucial point. What would a raid like this actually mean for the world? I mean, if a powerful nation can just decide to enter another sovereign country and arrest its leader, what happens to international law? What happens to the global balance of power? And that brings up the most fundamental legal question of all. The source analyzes this hypothetical mission through the lens of both American law and international law. Well, according to the analysis presented, the answer is a pretty hard no. The source argues it would violate the U.S. Constitution's requirement for congressional approval for war, and it would directly fly in the face of the UN Charter's protection of national sovereignty. In this scenario, the global reaction is swift and it is not good. The source describes just widespread condemnation from allies and rivals alike. You can see many of them calling the raid a dangerous precedent that threatens the whole idea of a rules-based international order.
And this all leads to the video's ultimate and, frankly, pretty bleak conclusion. It summarizes the philosophy behind an action like this with this quote, suggesting a world order where military and economic might is the only rule that really matters at the end of the day.
And so, that leaves us with one final, very provocative question. This whole hypothetical scenario forces us to ask, in a world of such unequal power, what's the real nature of international law, and who is actually held accountable?